Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and I tried to delay this video as much as I could because on this channel we've been able to cover a ton of class updates for mages, warlocks, death knights, and so many other classes, but one of the classes, or rather two classes, have really skimped out on a lot of beta development, which have been mostly shamans and rogues. And as someone who's currently maining a rogue, I really wanted to give them time to let those hero talents cook a little bit longer, but I think time has come for us to do our hero spec overview. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at all three hero talent options for the class of rogue, from the Trickster to the Fatebound and the Deathstalker, talk about some of the thematic gameplay options and what they offer to the class of rogue, how they're going to change the rotation, take a look at every single one of the talents, and give you some of my thoughts about how they function and play in this early beta build. As always, if you guys enjoy regular class updates like these on a war within beta, be sure to follow the channel. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So the first hero talent we have is the Trickster. 30 tricks and flashing blades are on display when a Trickster enters a fight. Tricksters distract their foes with misdirection or a sword's flourish, then slash them with a blade they never saw coming. So their main attack is actually going to be the Unseen Blade. Backstab, Shadow Strike, and also Sinister Strike for the Outlaw Spec now strike with an Unseen Blade, dealing 75,000 damage. Target struck are then phased for 5 seconds. Enemies that are phased take 5% more damage from the rogue and cannot parry your attacks, and this effect may only occur once every 20 seconds. And that's essentially the main component of the Trickster, is the additional damage that you get to do when you phase the target with backstabs and shadow strikes. It has a little animation around the target, puts a debuff on him, and you can basically use this effect once every 20 seconds, though there are other talents that interact with this main phase mechanic that can help augment and even speed up the amount of times that you can hit the target with this Unseen Blade to get better uptime of that main debuff. So for Trickster, we have things such as the Flawless Form, Unseen Blade, as well as Secret Technique or Killing Spree for Outlaw. Increase the damage of your finisher moves by 3% for 6 seconds, and multiple applications of this effect may overlap. So as I open up on the target with a Shadow Strike, we hit him with an Unseen Blade. I'm going to go for a Secret Technique right afterwards. All of those hits also apply Unseen Blade, which gives me Flawless Form for just a handful of seconds. It is one of those setups where once you use a finisher, Killing Spree, Secret Technique, you have to combine other finishers right afterwards. It is a fast-paced, quick reaction time type of hero spec that awards you the ability to plan ahead for your finishers and then execute those finishers back to back as soon as you create yourself that little opening window. Further down in the same row, we have other effects such as some utility stuff with mirrors or smoke. Smoke and mirrors, basically. Smoke, you take 5% reduced damage from phased targets, or mirrors, faint reduces area of effect damage by an additional 10%, a little bit of that survivability utility. Then we have on that same row, Surprising Strikes. Attacks that generate combo points deal 25% increased critical strike damage, which is kind of a huge buff, to distracted targets. It's been kind of going back and forth in the Rogue Discord at the very least. What does distracted even mean? Old flavor text and tooltips used to call phase buff distracted. So essentially phase, it means distracted. While the enemy is phased, your combo point builders do 25% more critical strike damage, which is kind of huge since rogues already have quite a bit of this crit damage interaction baked into their spec, and for specs such as Subtlety, shadow strikes do quite a bit of damage of your overall output. But for Outlaw, you're looking at things like ambushes, stunner strikes, pistol shots, so all of those abilities should also be amplified by quite a bit, which is quite a lot more sustained damage for both Subtlety and Outlaw included. Then we have another choice note of either Flicker Strike or we have the 1000 Cuts. This is just going to be new ways for you to activate Unseen Blade. Either Slice and Dice grants you 10% additional attack speed, which is kind of good, gives you auto attack's chance to refresh your opportunity strike with an Unseen Blade. Or if you want to take a little bit more direct approach with it, you can pick up Flicker Strike. Take an area effect damage while feint is active or while dodging with evasion, automatically refreshes your opportunity to strike with the Unseen Blade, and this effect can occur every 5 seconds. So if there are attacks that you can dodge or feint to reduce the AoE damage, you can basically use a defensive to activate offensive potential. So it encourages you proper use of defensives, and if there are moments where you can take advantage of it, you actually may be able to get more consistent procs of Unseen Blade with Flicker Strike than 1000 Cuts, which is kind of interesting when you think of a variety of different PvE situations where AoE or dodgeable attacks can be avoided. Down the middle, we have Devious Distraction. Secret Technique or Killing Spree now applies phase to any target it strikes. So if you want to apply phase to everybody all at once, Devious Distractions is the best way to do it. On the left hand side, we have some utility, some very unique rogue utility. Either So Tricky, where Trickster trade Threat Redirect now lasts an hour. So if you just want to, at the beginning of a Mythic Plus dungeon, place Trickster trade on a tank and then forget about it, you could, which is kind of interesting because you should never get any threat ever, as all of your threat that you generate all goes to the tank, which is again an interesting bit of utility. Or you can go with something different, or like Don't Be Suspicious, where Blind and Shroud Concealment have a shorter cooldown, while Pickpocket and Sap have a longer range. Again, this is really situational, but could be good, and I think it's really unique how they're playing around with some of those really unique rogue-specific abilities, like 10-yard range. It's not really going to end up helping you in raids, dungeons, or PvP, but it's a unique rogue thing that adds a bit of flavor to Trickster, which I do like seeing out of the hero spec in generally. Then we have some other cool options towards the bottom last row, actually very solid ones like Nimble Flurry. This one buffs your Blade Flurry damage for Outlaw, pretty plain, but for Subtlety, your auto attacks, Backstab, Shadow Strike, and Eviscerate now strike up to 7 additional nearby targets for 15% of normal damage while Flawless Form is active. Flawless Form being the buff up here whenever you hit with Unseen Blade or Secret Technique. In the middle row, we have more choices such as No Scruples, where finisher moves have a 10% chance to critical strike phase targets, which offers even more crit interactions. Your other choice note is going to be Cloud Cover. Distract now creates a cloud smoke for 10 seconds. Cooldown of the distract is increased to 90 seconds. Attack from within the cloud, apply phase with every one strike. So you get yourself a proper setup. Drop down the cloud cover, and every one of your attacks constantly triggers phase for every single one of them. So at least you can like maintain a phase debuff on multiple targets in AoE, or at least a single target. This doesn't mean that you're getting those hidden strikes left and right. So it's a little bit different than getting Unseen Blade attacks, but it is just constantly putting phase on everything around you. So if you're walking into a big AoE situation, you want to make sure everybody's phased for the entirety of it. You can drop this down. Now Smoke Bomb has a bit more functionality to it. If you need that window of, okay, burst coming up, I want to make sure the enemy's phased through the entire thing, that I'm not losing the charges or whatever, there's at least a little bit of interaction that gives Smoke Bomb, a benign ability, a little bit more of aggressive value. Though there's still bugs because Distract cannot be used on enemies that are already in combat, but you're not trying to distract them, you're just trying to create a smoke bomb. But it's just weirdness that they still have to solve, just bugs on the beta. But once it works, I think it'll maybe make it a little bit more functional. Your final one in the same row is going to be Destroying to Strikes. Secret Technique has a 10% reduced cooldown, so you can use it more regularly. And allows your next 2 strikes of Unseen Blade to ignore its cooldown. So if you want to get a bunch of these Unseen Blades happening all at once off of a Secret Technique, that builds up Flawless Form rather quickly, which is generally a really good combo, and just allows you to use Secret Technique a lot more aggressively, which is also good since it already has cooldown reduction elements as part of it. Though I think a Subtlety, you'll still end up using Secret Technique instead of Dance every single time. I don't think it will desync them, so you are still using it basically once every 30 seconds, so nothing really changes there. I think what's going to help though is with Outlaw, who can use Killing Spree more aggressively, since Secret Technique for Subtlety becomes Killing Spree for Outlaw. And if I have capstone, you actually saw it a little bit here and there, is Coup de Grace. After 4 strikes of Unseen Blade, your next Eviscerate will be performed as a Coup de Grace, functioning as if it had consumed 4 additional combo points. If the primary target is phased, you gain 5 stacks of Flawless Form. And when you do eventually get it, you actually will see a unique animation for your Eviscerate, which looks something like this. It looks awesome, but there's some intricacies about it. There's some weirdness about that one for sure, but it's a really cool ability nonetheless. So what Flawless Form or Coup de Grace really does is it actually locks you into an animation, which feels a little bit awkward, I'm not gonna lie. And I'm actually gonna do this. I'm gonna go and go into my Shadow Dance window here, rupture the target, Shadow Strike, Secret Technique, then follow up with a Eviscerate, just to show how strong the ability hits in general. Eviscerate, and I'm locked out. So there's like a little bit of a global missing there. It's a bit weird. You go in animation, you do quite a bit of damage with the Eviscerates, however, it is hitting for quite a lot. As you can see, a normal hit for 800,000, which would have been a million, 1.6 milli, so probably more damage than the Secret Technique, at least a single instance of it. However, you are animation locked. Almost like a Demon Hunter when they're using certain abilities, they're animation locked. For Rogue, you're an animation lock, which is unusual. This isn't a spec that has animation locks. We used to back in the day with abilities such as DFA, but something about it feels weird, however, because if you're Outlaw Rogue and you play Killing Spree, your animation lock for your Killing Spree, and that doesn't feel weird or awful to play with. But the ideas are awesome, and they are there, and I like in general. It's a finisher-based hero talent spec, which I think is good and solid for both Outlaw and Subtlety. I think it will fit both of the playstyles very well. It even has really nice utility options, from aggressive defenses or additional rogue unique utility, or even uses such as your cloud cover with distract, giving you a smoke bomb to place to get phased every single time. So there's some cool stuff there and nice interactions in general. I think this one is good. It's just, with the Consult that coup de grace animation lock thing, I think that'd be awesome. And as long as they fix all the Unseen Blade Subtlety bugged interactions, I think that'd be actually a solid hero talent to spec into, since it really amplifies what rogues are really good at, which is those powerful big finishers, which both Subtlety and Outlaw actually do benefit from quite a bit. And with that being said, let's move on to the Outlaw with the Fatebound. Fatebound is available for both Outlaw and Assassination specs. Fatebound eagerly act as the hand of fate, sowing chaos into well-laid plans, guided by the whims of a flipped Fatebound coin that deliver the ending their enemies are destined for, the ending they deserve. Now, it sounds awesome, but it's a very passive hero talent setup. We'll talk about all the different benefits, but just know this, it's very passive. There are some gameplay interactions, but it's for the most part very passive, though actually surprisingly solid in comparison to what rogues have. Your main ability is going to be Hand of Fate. Flip a Fatebound coin each time you finish a move consumes 5 or more combo points. Heads will increase the damage of your attacks by 5%, lasting until you flip tails. Tails deals cosmic damage to your target. Each effect is increased by 20% each time your Fatebound coin flips, matches the same outcome as the last flip. So we can literally actually just show off exactly how this plays right here, because it's really easy to work with. It's literally a coin flip of an ability. So as a user finisher, I get to flip a coin, and it landed on a tails. You can see there's actually an animation with it. Let me flip another coin, and you can see the animation plays through. Is it always going to fall back there? Okay, so it looks like it's always fallen to like the left of me. Yeah, but you can see there's a coin flip to the side. It has an animation. That animation of either a skull or swords actually matches the buff that you get. So either tails or heads. So that was a heads because it's a skull. There we go, there's tails. So you can see it actually changes the buff that you have. And these are supposed to stack. Right now the tails, the cosmic damage coin flip, that one stacks. The other one that's supposed to buff your damage by 5% stacking, that one doesn't really seem to stack all that well. And that's going to be the main mechanic, is to see how many coin flips you can get. You're not really trying to as much flip between one and the other. You're trying to see how many times you can get tails or how many times you can get heads in a row, because there's some advantages of getting that same outcome every single roll. Tails probably be better for single target, heads being better for AoE, but it's a lot of RNG. But either way, the roaches benefit from either one almost equally. Take a look at some of the hero talent choices. You either have Death's Arrival with Grapple Hook or Shadow Step that can be used a second time within 3 seconds with no cooldown. This one is fantastic for mobility because you can zoom out, you get another grapple hook, zoom back in. This one is awesome. Love playing with this one. The other choice is going to be Inexorable March. You cannot be slowed below 70% of your normal movement speed, while your Fatebound coin flips have an active streak of at least 2 flips matching the same face. In the middle row, we have Mean Streak. Fatebound coin flip by Dispatch or Envenom multiple times in a row are 33% more likely to match the same face as the last flip. So if you dispatch, you're more likely to get on the same coin face that you already had. Same thing for Envenom, making Envenom based playstyles and more instantaneous poison damage better for Assassination. On the left hand side, we have some utility or rather defensives with Tempted Fate. You have a chance equal to a critical strike chance to absorb 10% of any damage taken, up to a maximum chance of 40%. So 40% chance to absorb 10% of damage taken. Actually solid defensive for rogue survivability, or you can go with Chosen Revelry. Leech is increased by 0.5% for each time your Fatebound coin flip has flipped the same face in a row. So as you basically flip the same coin over and over and you get more stacks of that same face, like multiple tails, multiple heads, you basically just get more leech. And it kind of resets when you flip to the other face, but it's generally just a decent bit of leech as you play. From there on, we have some actual gameplay sort of and damaging talents such as Fate Intertwined. Fate Intertwined duplicates 50% of a Dispatch or Envenom's critical strike damage as Cosmic to 2 additional nearby enemies, so there's some cleave opportunity from single target damage. If there are no nearby targets, duplicate 50% to the primary target instead. So quite a lot of investment into Envenom and Dispatch as a playstyle for either spec. In the middle row, we have Edge Cases. Activating Adrenaline Rush or Death Mark causes your next Fatebound coin flip to land on its edge, counting as both heads and tails. From there on, we have a challenge such as Deal Fate. Sinister Strikes or Ambushes generate 1 additional common point when it strikes an additional time. For Assassination, it's going to be Mutilate, Ambush, and Venomize generate 1 additional common points when the trigger Seal Fate, which overall generates you more common points as either playstyle, playing into those specs' main mechanics. And then extra, we have Double Jeopardy. Your first Fatebound coin flip after breaking stealth flips 2 coins that are guaranteed to match the same face. So you could utilize stealth and resets like Vanish in order to guarantee that you'll be able to chain multiple coin flips of the same face, tails, or heads in a row, which gives stealth interaction a little bit more of a unique mechanic. But more than anything, it really just gives your stealth and re-stealth openers a little bit more of this buff type of mechanic, where you kind of want to stealth, pop your buffs, unstealth, re-stealth, get an opener, which hopefully will be fixed, but players were able to kind of find some cheese with it over on the beta. In the middle row, we have a bit more interactivity depending on your talents, either Destiny defined. Sinister Strike has a 5% increased chance to strike an additional time. Any Fatebound coin flips have an additional 5% chance to match the same face. For this one, it's actually going to increase your poison application chance and damage for Assassination. As for Inevitability, Cold Blood now benefits the next 2 abilities, but only applies to Dispatch. Fatebound coins flipped by these abilities are guaranteed to match the same face as the last, which allows you to play into Cold Blood and use that on your Dispatch or your Envenom in order to keep the chain of the same coin, so it's one of the ways that you can interact with the coin flip mechanic. On the left hand side, we have Deliver Doom. Damage dealt by your Fatebound coin flips, Tails, which is the cosmic damage, is increased by 21%. If there are no other enemies near the target, which gives you a little bit more single target output. Your final ability, your capstone, is Fateful Ending. When a Fatebound coin flips the same face for the 7th time in a row, so if you get 7 heads or 7 tails, the lucky coin now grants you 1% increase to all primary stats, so stamina as well as agility, secondary stats, so crit, versatility, mastery, haste, and tertiary stats, so a bit more avoidance, leech, and speed, until leave combat for 10 seconds. So essentially, once you get this unlocked, and you want to try and unlock this as early as possible, once you get this, you get a 1% in everything. That's a lot of secondary stats and primary stats for you to gain all across the board, which is a decent gain. I'm playing around with a Fatebound Rogue. It is a very passive hero talent that you're not really going to notice, but it's also very functional too. Like the damage output and the setups and little comp point things, you will notice that your rogue is playing just a little bit better, but there's no unique flair to the Fatebound besides the little coins that you get to flip. Overall, it's got very solid traits, and the crit-based playstyle for both Assassination and Outlaw plays, I think, really well and allows you to just stack into that heavy stat focus on one spec or the other. It also has a good set of defensives and utility options and mobility options, so there's quite a bit that you can get out of Fatebound Rogue. It's a very passive option, but it's probably the most functional one so far, and a lot of players have been vibing with this one more than any other hero spec. And lastly, we have ourselves the Deathstalker, which I will have a set of pros and cons at the very end after talking about all the traits, because there are some things that should be mentioned, but first let's take a look at the actual traits. Deathstalkers have a very simple explanation. They are the harbingers of death. Deathstalker strike from the shadows to bring a swift end to their targets. Your main mechanic and ability is going to be Deathstalker's Mark, a passive where ambushes or shadow strikes from stealth apply 2 stacks of Deathstalker's Mark to your target. When you spend 5 or more common points on an attack against the marked target, you consume an application of Deathstalker's Mark, dealing instant plague damage. And this one is going to have a lot of plague damage components. Plague damage being shadow and nature, which works well for subtlety, and assassination, which is what is shared by the Deathstalker hero talent. Deathstalker's Mark deals plague damage and increases the damage of your next ambush or mutilate by 20%, but you may only have 1 target marked at a time. So this is going to be very single target focused, but there are some ways that AoE damage can contribute back towards that single target, but this is going to be very singular focused type of hero spec, and the rest of the talent and traits do end up playing into that kind of mechanic, like starting off the bat with singular focus. Damage dealt to targets other than your marked target deals 3% plague damage to your marked target. So if you're doing AoE damage, hitting everything around you, all that AoE damage goes back to whoever you mark initially in your opener, just to make sure that all the damage kind of goes back to the primary target. In the middle row, we have Hunt Them Down. Auto attacks against marked targets deal additional plague damage, which, like mentioned, Nature and Shadow benefit in both playstyles. On the left, we have Clear the Witnesses. Your next Phantom Knives or Shuriken Storm, after applying Deathstalker's Mark, deals additional shadow damage and generates 1 additional common point. So once you apply your Death Mark to the target, it does generate your additional common points and quite a bit of additional raw damage. So that could be kind of useful, maybe to make sure that you get all the common points in your opener. By the way, I need to get my dagger staff ready. I knew I was missing something. Further down, we have the next row, either with Symbolic Victory, where Shiv additionally increases the damage of an next Venom by 10%, or for Subtlety, it is going to be your Symbols of Death will increase the damage of an next Eviscerate or Black Powder. Or you can go with Lingering Darkness. After Death Mark or Shadow Blades expires, you gain 30 seconds of 10% increased nature damage or 10% increased shadow damage. In the middle, we have Corrupt Blood, where Rupture deals additional plague damage each time it deals damage, stacking up to 10 times. Rupture duration increased by 3 seconds, so if you're playing around the ability of Rupture, you'll want to make sure that you apply it on the target, and then you want to maintain this Corrupt Blood for as much as possible. Let the Rupture stack up as much as you can, because otherwise you'll refresh the stacks of your the blood too early. So you kind of just want to leave your Rupture on them, leave the Rupture doing damage, leave Corrupt Blood getting the most amount of value that it can, because Corrupt Blood actually deals a decent bit of damage as you generate more Rupture ticks. On the left hand side, we have Flensing Knives, where Slicing Dice causes you mutilates or backstabs to deal additional plague damage, so just additional bit of overall output. On the bottom right hand side, on the whole last row, it's a bunch of choice nodes, either Shroud of Night, where Shadow Consumer duration is increased by 5 seconds, or you can go with Shadow Walker. Each time you consume a stack of Deathstalker's Mark, reduce the cooldown of Shadow Step by 3 seconds, which is actually a really fast cooldown reduction, because as you go for a mark in the opener, then you can basically consume all the stacks rapidly and keep reapplying it very, very rapidly also. So you can actually get a lot of cooldown reduction for your Shadow Step for additional mobility. In the middle row, we have things such as Follow the Blood. Phantom Knives, Shuriken Storm, Crimson Tempest, and Black Powder deal 20% additional damage, while 3 or more targets are afflicted by Rupture. So you could get quite a bit of additional AoE from all those abilities if you have multiple targets with Rupture. For Assassination, it's going to be easy with this Indiscriminate Carnage. For Subtlety, you may have to work to get a bunch of Ruptures out, but there are also ways to save on the globals of Ruptures. Or you can go with Momentum of Despair. If you critical strike with a Phantom Knights or Shuriken Storm, you increase the critical strike chance of Phantom Knights or Shuriken Storm and Black Powder by 15% for 12 seconds. On the left hand side, we have some utility options and defensive options such as Bait and Switch. Evasion now reduces magic damage taken up to 20%, while Cloak of Shadows reduces physical damage taken by 20%. So a bit of a, as the talent suggests, a Bait and Switch. A physical defensive now reduces magic damage and vice versa. On the left hand side, we have Ethereal Cloak, where Cloak of Shadows duration is increased by 2 seconds, which gives you a little bit more uptime on that magic immunity, which can be good, but I do like the versatility of Bait and Switch. The capsule trait is going to be Darkest Night. When you consume the final Deathstalker's Mark from a target, gain 40 energy, and your next Envenom cast with maximum common points is guaranteed to critical strike. It deals 60% increased damage and applies 2 stacks of Deathstalker's Mark to the target, replacing Venom with Eviscerate for the Spec of Subtlety. And that's really the main mechanic of Darkest Night and Deathstalker. You apply the mark at the very beginning, you get all these various buffs, you spam finishers at 5 common points to consume the marks. Once all the marks are consumed, then you want to use a max common point Eviscerate or Envenom to reapply the mark, and then you can kind of chain the mark over and over off of the enemy target, reapplying it, consuming it, reapplying it, consuming it, with all your finishers doing additional damage while doing plague damage all across the board. That's essentially the Deathstalker, which would be definitely a solid bit of base single target gameplay. As the playstyle around your finishers, I mean, it works pretty well, especially as Assassination. And there's also a little bit of plague damage all across the board. So for single target, for AoE, there's a lot of bit of additional damage that just goes right through armor and just amplifies all of your abilities entirely. And also it has really interesting defensive options, either a longer Cloak of Shadows duration or some multi value across Bait and Switch, which could give rogues quite a bit of survivability overall. Like, this is actually a really solid option. And there's a couple of few variations of gameplay that you can pick from in terms of mobility, in terms of how you end up utilizing your Linear Darkness or Symbolic Victory, because there's some value that you can be gained from Deathstalker as is. And when playing it in a vacuum, it actually plays just fine in terms of, you know, hitting a train dummy or in a pure single target raid fight. Like the actual rotational gameplay of it, it's kind of solid, I'd say. But as I said, that is in a vacuum. The bigger problems, however, with Deathstalker are going to be different for Subtlety or Assassination. As a Subtlety rogue, you get access to the mark by either Shadow Striking from stealth or from Shadow Dance. That means you are able to build up a lot of different charges of that mark onto a target. However, in a normal Subtlety gameplay, you use so many Shadow Strikes and stack with the mark so many times that during the downtime, trying to get through all of those charges with backstabs and eviscerates until your next Shadow Dance and Symbols combo is basically impossible, and you cannot get the benefit of your capstone option in order to get that beefy eviscerate to then reapply the mark, because you constantly keep applying the mark through just normal Subtlety gameplay. So unless you do some weird finagling or adjust your rotation just to burn through the marks, you never really get to see your capstone, which is just awkward to play into, and I don't think that's what they intended for the spec to be, just for Subtlety to never get benefit from capstone. For Assassination, the ability and the playstyle is more or less functional, but there's always that weirdness about the actual mark ability. If you use the ambush, your one ambush opener on a target, and the die before you can get through all of your marks to get the capstone, you lose the mark. So unless if you have a vanish to then reapply a mark on your target, for the most part, you're not going to run into the situation. But I was doing a Siege of Borealis where I went through an opener, I marked a target, I was going to go through all of my finishers, all my column points to get the capstone, reapply it on a new target, but a Brewmaster Monk with a lot of health touched to death the target with my mark. Therefore, unless I use a vanish in order to ambush, I cannot regain the mark or access to my hero talents unless I actually find an opportunity to re-stealth and ambush to reapply the mark. So they're gonna find a way to solve it. It is one of those niche situations, but when it happened to me, I thought to myself, uh-oh, this is gonna happen for rogues from time to time, and not being able to access your entire set of hero talents because your target died before you could get through all of your finishers just honestly feels pretty bad, because it makes you think, yeah, this is why everybody told me to run Fatebound or run Trickster instead. Oh, also, did I mention that other rogues that are running Deathstalker will apply and add charges to your death mark as well? Yeah, so if you have multiple rogues shadow striking at the same time, you basically get through so many charges, so many stacks of this mark, you can never spend through it, and it just gets all kinds of weird when it comes to raid testing. But besides those awkward situations, scenarios, and interactions with Subtlety and Assassination, Deathstalker on its own is not a bad hero spec on paper. It just needs a couple of fixes, and we've been waiting for those for so long. This is why I really try to delay a rogue hero talent video for as much as I could, just to give them opportunity to cook with these hero talents, because they sound fine on paper. They just need a couple of adjustments, couple of alterations, but for the most part, they should work ideally, properly, hopefully. But if I were to stop blabbing about Rocio for a second, I do want to pass it off to you guys in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on the rogue hero talents? What are your thoughts on the Trickster, the Fatebound, and the Deathstalker? And after all the fixes, hopefully at some point in the future, maybe even with the next build, potentially, possibly, which one of those hero talents are you currently leaning towards the most? Do you like the idea of a Subtlety rogue Trickster, or potentially an Assassination rogue that's a Fatebound, or Assassination Deathstalker? And what hero talents would you probably match up with which playstyle? And what changes would you like to see for all these hero talents, if any are included? Let me know all those thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video, or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.